A terrifying lack of remorse was shown by murderers during their court procedures, as detailed in the compelling and emotionally packed documentary Killers Who Were Unapologetic in Court. This documentary highlights the heartbreaking encounters the relatives of the victims had while trying to find justice and closure. This documentary illustrates the incredible resiliency of families left in ruins by callous acts of violence through a combination of potent interviews, trial footage, and professional analysis. It highlights a series of disturbing cases that reveal the complete lack of regret displayed by these remorseless offenders, leaving the courts and the families perplexed and distraught. The video examines the psychological and emotional toll that the perpetrator's callousness has on the families of the victims when they come face to face with it. Their brave tales provide a highly personal look into their encounters with a lack of remorse or empathy while they searched for answers and demanded justice for their loved ones. In addition to the families' accounts, legal experts and psychologists offer insightful viewpoints by examining the intricate dynamics underlying the lack of remorse and its effects on the justice system. The purpose of the documentary is to explore the psychological factors that may lead some people to behave in such a distressing manner in court. Michael Elijah Adams, a man who claims to have murdered 16 drifters while traveling by train across the U.S. for years, has declared he is proud of his alleged murderous spree. Crazy Mike, Michael Elijah Adams, who killed John Owens in Placer County, California, is currently serving a 15-year sentence to life in prison. The 48-year-old, who was born in Michigan, started boarding trains at the age of 14 and joined the Freight Train Riders Association, FTRA, which transports heroin by rail across America. Adams admitted to killing Robert Allen Chassereau in 2006 during an interview with WTVR-TV, and he stated he was looking forward to retirement in a Virginia jail. "We were the big dogs," he added. "On the frontier, we remained. With our use of firearms, drugs, and females, we were the violent ones. Who would suspect a kilo-carrying scum?" Everything excellent has to come to an end. As the temperature rose and bodies piled up, questions began to be raised. "I'm pleased with my work. I'm an essential component of society." According to Adams, the FTRA was a loosely affiliated group of drifters founded by Vietnam veterans. He asserts that for over 30 years on the rails, he used firearms, axe handles, and planks of wood to kill 16 drifters. Adams admitted to killing Mr. Chassereau while he was being tried for the murder in California because he did not want to serve time in one of the state's gladiator prisons. "Society labels me as a serial killer," he said, speaking to the TV station. "I've been called an enforcer by others, and other people simply believe I'm crazy." According to Detective Thomas Holsinger, Adams was aware of information about Mr. Chassereau's apparel and injuries that was only available to the murderer. Adams is currently under investigation for several unsolved drifter killings, including the 1999 slaying of gay homeless man Edward Northington, whose severed head was discovered on a footbridge in Henrico County, Virginia. He is awaiting the California governor's approval of a plea agreement that will see him serving his entire life term in Virginia. Joseph Paul Franklin, a psychologically unstable man from an abusive, dysfunctional family who later became a radical racist and a serial killer, made for a deadly combination. At the age of 27, Joseph Paul Franklin went on a horrible murdering spree that started in 1977. At least 15 men, women, and children were killed by him until his murderous reign came to an end in 1980 in some 11 states. He also acknowledged killing Larry Flynt, the publisher of pornographic material, and shooting civil rights activist Vernon Jordan. Franklin, as James Clayton Vaughn Jr., adopted white nationalist beliefs as a teenager. He later changed his name to express his appreciation for both Benjamin Franklin and Nazi Joseph Goebbels. He left high school after suffering a major eye injury, got married, turned into an abusive spouse, and started accumulating petty offenses. Franklin's hostility toward minorities developed as his affiliation with white nationalist organizations grew. Because he believed they didn't take their hatred far enough, he had already rejected even the most extreme hate groups by the middle of the 1970s, he says. He didn't want to just moan. He wanted to assault. He later claimed that motivating his fellow supremacists to take action was his self-directed mission. 1976's summer was a tipping point. Franklin stalked an interracial couple over Labor Day weekend in Atlanta and mace sprayed them. His first known physical assault was this one. After that, things got worse. He destroyed a synagogue in Tennessee on July 29, 1977. A few days later, he killed 2 men in Wisconsin, one black and one white, after running into them in a parking lot. Franklin wandered the nation for the following 3 years, robbing banks, quite proficiently, according to law enforcement investigations, and picking off his targets with a sniper rifle. He may have killed over 20 people while also seriously hurting 6 more. By 1980, Franklin was being pursued by the FBI and its allies. Franklin remained unnoticed for a while, thanks to the frequently great distances between his crimes, the absence of linkages in the evidence, and his talent for leading a nomadic life. This changed in September 1980, when a gun was discovered in the trunk of the automobile Franklin was driving by a perceptive Kentucky policeman. Franklin was taken in for questioning after a records check revealed a warrant that was still active. While being held, he managed to escape, but the Bureau was pursuing him. Multiple ties to the racially motivated sniper attacks across the nation were suggested by evidence found in the automobile. The behavioral analysts at the Bureau contributed their information, and the FBI shared its expanding understanding of Franklin's traits and strategies with the public and law enforcement. Franklin's racist tattoos and his need for blood bank donations for money while in between bank robberies were 2 important details. Within a few weeks, a blood bank employee in Florida alerted the Bureau about a man resembling Franklin. On October 28, 1980, FBI investigators found him in Lakeland, Florida, and promptly apprehended him. For the next 2 decades, Franklin was the target of legal action throughout the country. He was ultimately found guilty of numerous murders, assaults, and other offenses at both the state and federal levels. In addition to receiving the death penalty in other states, he was given a life sentence. He was executed in Missouri on November 11, 2013, for the murder of a man who was in front of a St. Louis synagogue in 1977. Joanna Dennehy. Joanne Dennehy was called a cruel, determining, selfish, and manipulative serial killer by the court who sentenced her to death in prison, making her the first woman to receive such a sentence. Following a dramatic hearing at the Old Bailey in central London on Friday, Mr. Justice Spencer determined that Dennehy's offenses were so unusually terrible that he became the first judge to condemn a woman to serve a whole life term. But when she was being punished, some of the 3 accomplices who were sitting next to her in the dock grinned and made small talk with Dennehy. The court revealed that the 31-year-old had confessed to killing to see if I was as cold as I thought I was, a doctor. I developed a taste for it as it became more delectable. The mother of 2, who was motivated by a sadistic lust for blood, killed 3 men she knew in Peterborough in 10 days in March, before traveling to Hereford, where she randomly knifed 2 men as they walked their dogs in broad daylight, 9 minutes apart. Peterborough resident Dennehy admitted to the 3 killings and 2 attempted murders. Łukasz Slabojewski, a 31-year-old Polish man, was her first victim. He was enticed to a residence in Peterborough via provocative texts, where he was subsequently stabbed in the heart. He texted a pal with the words, "Life is beautiful," since he had begun to think of Dennehy as his lover. After being stabbed in the heart, his body was put in a wheelie bin, and Dennehy once opened the lid to show a 14-year-old girl the body. Within 10 days, Dennehy killed her housemate, John Chapman, 56, by stabbing him 3 times in the chest, twice in the heart, and once in the neck with a pocket knife. She then admitted to a companion, "Oops, I've done it again." Kevin Lee, her 48-year-old landlord and boss, became the 3rd victim after being seduced by Dennehy with the promise of sexual favors. Lee was discovered naked in a ditch while wearing a black sequined dress. The judge, who claimed to have looked at photos of the corpse, stated that the placement of the body in the ditch was intended to be a final humiliation, and further stated, "The disposal of his body was part of the playing out of your sexual and sadistic motivation." According to the judge, Dennehy wrote him a letter in which she denied feeling any regret for the murders but claimed she did for the attempted killings, which she attributed to drunken cruelty and a lack of respect for human life. She stabbed Robin Bariza in the back in Hereford on April 2nd at 3:42 p.m. Robin Bariza afterward referred to her as evil after she was apprehended. John Rogers was left for dead and his dog was taken 9 minutes after she stabbed him. Additionally, the court heard that Dennehy felt ecstatic when she heard that the police were looking for her. She is only the 3rd woman in English criminal history whose risk of release has been determined to be unacceptably high. Instead of a judge, Jack Straw, the Home Secretary, sentenced the other two to die in custody. Myra Hindley, a murderer of Moors who is now dead, was the first. The second was Rosemary West for her involvement with her husband Fred in a string of at least 10 homicides. On Friday, the judge ruled that the complete life sentence was appropriate since each of the 3 killings required a significant amount of premeditation or preparation. Spencer claimed that Dennehy had paraphilia sadomasochism, a disease in which sexual enjoyment is obtained from pain and humiliation, as well as a personality problem. She, he claimed, lacked the full spectrum of human emotions. Gary Stretch, who assisted Dennehy in disposing of all 3 bodies, was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 19 years for both his involvement in the 2 attempted murders as well as his assistance. As Dennehy searched Hereford for potential attackers, he drove her around. Leslie Layton received a 14-year term, and Robert Moore, a third conspirator who admitted helping an offender and was 55 years old, received a 3-year sentence. In the words of Lee's wife, Christina, "We feel Joanne Denny brainwashed Kevin, causing him to make a bad decision, and he has paid for that with his life." Bariza claimed that Dennehy's arbitrary attack had left him a different person. "I'm not as confident as I used to be. I'm quieter and not my normal self," the retired firefighter admitted. Dennehy is the second person to be sentenced to a whole life in prison this week, and the second since the Court of Appeals removed any remaining dispute regarding the legality of ordering prisoners to remain in prison until death. Tommy Lynn Sells. Tommy Lynn Sells, a convicted serial killer who was sentenced to jail in 1999 and admitted to carrying out dozens of slayings around the nation, was killed on Thursday in Texas. Katie Harris, 13, was murdered by Sells, 49, while she slept in her Del Rio, Texas home. Sells was sentenced to death for her murder, but he has also been implicated in at least 17 other slayings and claimed to be responsible for many more. Before passing away, Sells declined to say anything. He then took a few breaths, closed his eyes, and started to snore as the deadly injection medicines started to work, according to the Associated Press. He immediately stopped moving, and 13 minutes later, at 6:27 p.m. CT, he was declared dead. When a district court determined that the Texas prison system was compelled to reveal information regarding its source of lethal injection medicines and how the chemicals are tested, Sells' execution had been postponed earlier. However, a federal appeals court invalidated the judgment and overturned it on Wednesday. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected Sells' attorney's request to postpone the serial killer's execution on Thursday. Sells' lawyers said in a statement to ABC News on Thursday that they believed how we choose to execute convicts reflects on us as a society. It is impossible to guarantee that executions are humane and constitutional without being open and honest regarding lethal injections, especially the source and quality of the chemicals to be used. We are hoping that the U.S. Supreme Court and the Texas courts will eventually concur that there needs to be openness about the execution procedure so that convicts can defend their Eighth Amendment rights. The 2010 ABC News show on Nightline Prime, Secrets of Your Mind, which explored the inner workings of the human brain and how those affect behavior, included Sells as one of its subjects. He was mentioned in a story about scientists trying to figure out why someone would become a brutal killer by examining the brain scans of murderers and psychopaths. In a spooky 2010 Jailhouse interview, Sells, an extreme example of someone with a violent mindset, discussed his horrific past with ABC News. By the age of 14, Sells was addicted to killing as a young lad growing up in St. Louis. Hate is me. In 2010, Sells claimed, "When you look at me, you look at hate. I have no idea what love is. Love and sorry are 2 words I dislike using because I'm about to hate them." As his victims turned up from coast to coast, he was able to avoid police for over 15 years because of his nomad lifestyle. Sells claimed that his drug use contributed to his murdering sprees. "The first time I took a shot of marijuana, I felt better than I ever had in my entire life. It was such a rush the first time I killed someone," Sells recalled telling ABC News at the time. When Sells reportedly beat Dardine to death, she was 7.5 months along in the pregnancy. She gave birth to a girl during the attack after going into early labor. As well as Dardine's 3-year-old son, The newborn was later found bludgeoned to death, according to investigators. Several days later, her husband's body was discovered. He had suffered 3 headshot wounds. If Sells wasn't already on Texas's death row, according to investigators working on the Dardenne investigation, they would have taken him into custody for this crime. In conclusion, Killers Who Were Unapologetic in Court is a compelling and emotionally charged documentary that exposes the lack of remorse exhibited by murderers during their court procedures. The heart-wrenching stories shared by the victims' families and the insights provided by legal experts and psychologists make this documentary a gripping exploration of the psychological factors behind such disturbing behavior. Subscribe now to witness the incredible resilience of families seeking justice and closure, and gain a deeper understanding of the profound impact of remorseless killers on both the justice system and the lives of those affected.